Welcome to the Purpose-Based Retirement with Certified Financial Planner Casey Weade. Casey is the president of Howard Bailey Financial.
Whatever risk you face during your retirement years, we've got a plan.
A published author and radio host.
It's not how much we make during the good times, it's how much we keep during those really bad times.
His advocacy for retirees and pre-retirees has made him a sought-after speaker and trusted financial leader.
And putting a real plan together.
This is the Purpose-Based Retirement.
Good to see you again. I am Lee Kelso here with Casey Weade, Certified Financial Planner and the President of Howard Bailey Financial. We're going to begin the program today taking a look at some common mistakes. We're going to call them faux pas that people make as they press in toward retirement. And then a little later in the program, why estate planning isn't just for people who have large estates, something you need to think about. But let's begin with Casey's experience over the years. You've met with hundreds of retirees, people heading toward retirement. And you see some common mistakes, right?
I do see some common mistakes, and I think it's really nice if we can get ahead of the game and you get the opportunity to see some of the mistakes that I've seen people make. And some of those mistakes can be fixed if we get ahead of the game, if we're starting 5-10 years in advance, rather than waiting the day of retirement and trying to build our emergency fund or figuring out our budget or how much we need to retire. Let's start to get ahead of the game, and we're going to feel a lot better going towards retirement at the same time.
All right, we've got 7 points we want to make for you. We're going to start first with investing at age 59. The same way you were investing back at age 39.
Yeah, and I see this time in and time again because what happens is we get caught up in this accumulation stage where we're just saving for retirement and we've just been stuffing money into that 401k and not really paying attention to how it's being invested. Are you investing the same way today as you were investing 20 or even 30 years ago? And many times that is the case. And we have to understand that there are some basic rules of thumb when it comes to how much risk we should have with our retirement portfolio. If we're 39 or 40 years old, then we should use the rule of 100, which says what, Lee?
You take your age, subtract it from 100, and that's the amount that you can afford to have at risk.
That's right. And then the other portion should be in fixed income or protected investments. So for 40, we should have about 40% of our assets in protected investments, 60% at risk. Some people have made this a rule of 110 or 120 because of longevity today. But those are some really good rules of thumb. And the reason for that is because we have less and less of a four-letter word as we get close to retirement. What is that?
That four-letter word is time.
That's time, right? So we have less time as we get to retirement. And why do we say we have less time?
Well, because you've got to have enough time for the market to go through its cycles and help you recover from loss.
Exactly. And many times, though, retirees, I'll hear them say, well, I can't take any more risk anymore. I can't afford to suffer any more losses. I can't take the risks I used to take. And that is totally true. But it's not like you're out of time on all of your investments. What you have to do is buy yourself some time. And that means we have to set some assets aside to be that protected asset, to create that income that you'd like to have during your retirement years. Take care of health care, then we can take risk with the remaining assets. And that often comes down to matching up really closely with that rule of 100, especially if we've focused really hard on the purpose that our retirement dollars are supposed to accomplish for us, whether that's income or emergencies or health care or taxes or inflation protection. And really focusing on that purpose can usually get us down to that rule of 100 and right where we're supposed to be, which is probably not taking nearly as much risk and investing like we're 30 years old still.
You bet. The other thing that we need to be thinking about is Social Security and walking into those retirement years with a plan for Social Security.
Yeah, you know, the average Social Security benefit today is about $1,300 a month. So that's the average Social Security benefit retirees pulling off of $1,300 a month. Multiply that times 12. That gives you about $16,000 a year is the average amount of a Social Security benefit that a retiree is pulling on today. Now, using the 4% withdrawal rule, in order to recreate that Social Security benefit, you'd have to have around $400,000 saved for retirement, not including taxes, which might make that $450,000 or $500,000 that you'd have to have saved. So now think about you as maybe a 60, 65-year-old single individual. That means that benefit's worth about $500,000. If you're married, it might be worth over $1 million. You wouldn't jump out and make a decision on a home that was worth $400,000 or $500,000 or $1 million on a whim. You would have a plan put in place before you you did that. I think sometimes it's just recognizing how big of a decision this really is when it comes to Social Security, whether that's Social Security taxes or your basic income taxes on your other assets at the same time, longevity risk, and taking into consideration that whole plan and making Social Security one piece of the puzzle and not overlooking the huge value that's really in that benefit.
You know, people spend a lot of time collecting receipts and whatnot to prepare their taxes, but when we head toward retirement, you want us to be thinking about something else.
Right, tax planning, not just tax preparation, but that's what you've probably been doing most of your entire working years, is you've been going through and just stepping into that April 15th every single year, stepping into your accountant's office, H&R Block or TurboTax, whatever it is, you go in, they tell you this is how much you owe, and you can save a little bit if you make this IRA contribution or if you buy a car or a truck, I should say. And you don't really think about that long term. What happens when you actually get to retirement and it's time to start taking distributions from those accounts? And that might be distributing those different tax buckets from not just tax deferred assets, but tax free, having some money in a 1099 bucket, and really diversifying all those things so that we can focus on what's going to happen once we get to retirement. And sometimes that means short-term pain for long-term gain. Taking advantage of your tax brackets that you have today can mean a huge difference once you get to retirement. I've got a client that I worked with that had a net operating business loss of around $500,000. They were really struggling to meet their income goals with a retirement plan until I found out they had that net operating loss, and we can convert all their traditional IRAs to Roth, and they'll have tax-free income for the rest of their life. That's tax planning, but their CPA wasn't helping them figure that part out.
Yeah. Good move. I like the thought of that. So let's talk now about healthcare. We always think that healthcare is going to be covered by maybe Medicare, right?
Sure, yeah. We often think that all those expenses we have once we step into retirement will be covered by Medicare. It's one of the common misconceptions that I see people make. They say, well, I just need to make it to 65 and everything will be okay. Well, Medicare still has a cost to it. Medicare Part B might have a Medicare Advantage plan or a supplement. You have cost to having that traditional Medicare, and if you have that basic plan, then it probably covers most of your healthcare expenses, but those are short-term healthcare expenses. It's the long-term healthcare expenses that are often overlooked. If you need care beyond 30 or beyond 60 days, as in the case of Medicare, then you have to start paying for those expenses out of pocket. Now let's take, for instance, you had a major medical problem and you're 65 years old. Now all of a sudden you have this expense for skilled nursing care in the state of Indiana. It's about $7,000 a month or $84,000 a year. If you have that expense, your traditional Medicare plan, your Medicare supplement, isn't going to cover that cost. So what we often have to do is we have to put in other plans. And what I see is, for a lot of the people I meet with, it's not so much market risk that's going to put them out of their retirement. It's not the concerns about taxes that are going to put them out of retirement. Longevity, it's going to be that major healthcare problem that pushes them out of retirement. We have to have a strategy for that, because about 70% of people over the age of 65 will need some form of long-term care at some point during their retirement years.
You know, we always think about an emergency fund as you're planning life, 3 months, 6 months, whatever's right for you of your household expenses. Why do we need to rethink that as we head toward retirement?
Well, we're ending up in a place that I like to think of retirement as unemployment. Right? It's an extended period of time when you don't have the ability to go get a second job or to work some overtime on the weekends. You don't have that ability to pick up a little additional income in case you have some type of an emergency. And that's maybe the way you've lived during most of your working years. Now you're entering unemployment. You don't have that luxury anymore. So we need to have a larger emergency fund than maybe we did during our working years. That might mean 12 months. I like to see 6 to 12 months in a short-term emergency fund, maybe in savings and checking and things like that. And then beyond that, it'd be nice to have 12 to 24 months in additional reserves that we can set aside that maybe we can't have in a minute's notice. Maybe it takes a few days or a few weeks to get it, but it's liquid, it's available in case we do need it. There's no penalties, and it's making us 3 to 5% a year. So at least it's creating some return. But it's a nice big emergency fund because we don't have the same luxuries that you might have had during your working years.
Well, there you go. Some faux pas to avoid as you think about retirement. And one way you can get some assistance with that is by taking advantage of our special offer today. For the next 10 people who call right now at 482-9559, we're offering a complimentary financial review of your entire financial and retirement plan. It's an opportunity to learn more about your money and your future so you can make the best decisions possible moving forward. So for the next 10 callers, Casey and the team are willing to make time on their calendar, visit with you, and give you your very own purpose-based retirement. We're back in just a second. You stay with us.
Hi, I'm Casey Weade, a certified financial planner practitioner and the president of Howard Bailey Financial. Do you feel that your financial professional should put your interests above all else? Well, I do, but Wall Street doesn't. While lobbyists seek to delay a universal fiduciary duty on all retirement accounts across the financial services industry, you can begin working with an advisory team that's ahead of the curve. Don't you want to work with someone who puts your interests ahead of their own? If you said yes, then give us a call today.
You need a plan for retirement to create the lifestyle you've always dreamed of. The first step is to tune into the Purpose-Based Retirement Radio Hour with your hosts, Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson, every Saturday morning at 11 and Sunday afternoon at 1 on 1190 WOWO and 107.5 FM.
And welcome back. Marshall Johnson, the Vice President at Howard Bailey Financial, has joined us today. We're going to be talking a little bit about life cycles as we pass through these accumulation phases and the other phases of our life. What do we need to be keeping in mind?
Yeah, the thing we need to realize here as we go through these investing life cycles, and Lee, we start out in that accumulation phase where we're really just trying to save as much as possible. Maybe the family's young, we're just trying to accumulate that nest egg. And then we begin to, towards the end of our working years, we start to work into that conservation and preservation. We just want to hang on to what we have. Right. And then we get into the income and the distributive phase, and later in life, the gifting phase. So we go through these three distinct life cycles, and it's very important to understand where you're at and where you're headed. And Casey, you've got a great chart that helps give a timeline to some of this.
I do. And when we take a look at these different timelines, we do start in this asset accumulation phase, and during that asset accumulation phase, we're really just focusing on, like you said, accumulating as much as we possibly can in order to get to that retirement date at some point in the future. And during those years, we have a shortage of cash flow typically. We have a relatively high debt ratio. Maybe we have some student loans. Maybe we have a fairly large mortgage. And we have a relatively low net worth. As we progress through to this next phase, we get a little bit older. Now we're getting into our 40s or 50s. Now maybe we've paid off most of the student loans and other pieces of debt. Maybe we've paid down most of the mortgage. That might be our last piece of debt. We have a higher net worth and a higher cash flow, and we can really start socking some money away for retirement. And now we start thinking, boy, now I'm getting quite a bit in this 401k. Maybe it's $200,000, maybe it's $2 million we have stuffed away, and we say, boy, we're getting pretty close, and now we're getting concerned about those major fluctuations in the market, and now we're saying we just want to protect this or conserve it for this next phase, which is distribution. As we step into the distribution phase, now we're stepping into retirement. Hopefully we've got all of our debts paid down, maybe we've paid off our mortgage at this point, we've got a higher net worth, we've got higher cash flow from those investments, and now we're focusing on distributing those assets, preserving, protecting, distributing, and then we get to those later phases where it's about gifting and leaving assets behind to the next generation. And in each one of these phases, it takes a different emphasis and a different type of strategy that I think we often overlook. And that's what the purpose-based retirement's really all about, is sitting back and saying, you know, interest rates are at all-time lows. Stock market valuations are at all-time highs. So how do we plan today? Because it's got to be more efficient than at any other time during our working years. When I was in cross country, my cross country coach said, Casey, the closest distance between a straight line, between 2 points is a straight line. Right. Stop, zigzagging around the corners. Go straight there. Right. And I think we get caught up in these investments about making 10% or 5% or 8%, or this annuity's bad, this annuity's good, this mutual fund's good, this mutual fund's bad, and it's really not about that. In order to be efficient, in order to plan in this environment, this economic environment, we have to focus on the specific purpose for those dollars, which will come out of the different phase that you're experiencing during your working life or retirement life.
It seems like there's a real fine line between that asset accumulation phase and our distribution phase, right?
There certainly is, Lee, and it's, I think think a lot of families, when they come in and talk to us, they just feel like they have this urge that they need to get a little bit more conservative. And what's happening there is they're moving from that accumulation phase into conservation, and they want to play a little bit more defense. And the idea here is you are drawing a line in the sand. When you step away from your workforce, you're drawing a line in the sand between growth and income, Casey, and we need to understand where we're at on which side of the equation. And it doesn't happen overnight. I want people to realize, when you showed that chart, is one phase kind of bleeds into the next. Things don't just happen overnight, but we need to begin to shift our portfolio and understand that it's not all about the return anymore. It's about preserving what we've got.
Well, you just mentioned return. We all focus a lot on return on investment, ROI. You want us to start thinking about ROL. Now, what's that method?
Yeah, well, and I am seeing this more today. I don't know, lately it's been a lot of the folks I'm sitting down with are really starting to get this concept that it's not about return on investments at this time in your life. It's about the return on your life at this time in your life, those life experiences that you've worked so hard for during your entire working years. And a couple that I worked with the other day that I said, there's two different strategies we can put together for your income. Either we can create a guaranteed income strategy and you'll never run out of money as long as you live, or we can have a segmented strategy where we have some risk to the income strategy that we're creating, and it might actually allow you to preserve that principal and leave more behind. It's cheaper, and it might allow you to leave more behind, but there's some risk to it, while the other one's a little bit more expensive, but you don't have anything to worry about. And I said, for me, I would choose a segmented strategy all day, because I know over the next 20 or 30 years, the market will go through its ups and downs. With good quality management, I'll be able to do better probably than those guarantees. And they said, Casey, I don't really care what's left behind at this point. I just don't want to have to worry about opening up my statement and seeing a $10,000 loss or a $50,000 loss, because that hurts my quality of life. And at this point in my life, that's what it's all about. Quality of life.
You know, your dad has taught me a lot about this return on life concept, and the idea, Lee, is we work all these years to build and save for retirement, but the idea is we want to learn how to spend and how to enjoy life, and retirement is about enjoying those golden years, not about sitting back and watching the markets day in and day out, and having a plan like you discussed.
And I think as advisors, sometimes we get caught up in our own background and our own history. I've had this problem myself, where I say, well, this is what I would do because you'll make more over the long haul, and I'm confident in the market that you'll do well over the next 20 or 30 years. Well, on the other hand, that's not what they're looking for. That may be not what you're looking for, and we need to let those advisor biases get out of our system and just be there to give you the tools, give you the education, give you the opportunity to make your own decision and build your own financial house, rather than us telling you what to do with your own money.
Yeah, I like that idea. And if you are one of those folks who feels like your advisor might be trying to puff their ego with your portfolio, here's an opportunity for you to have a little different viewpoint. For the next 10 people who dial right now, we're going to offer a complimentary review of your entire financial and retirement plan. It's an opportunity to learn more about your money, what it's supposed to do for you and what you need it to do for you, so you can make the best decisions for yourself and your family going forward. So for the next 10 callers, Casey and the team will make time on their calendar to visit with you and give you your very own purpose-based retirement. The number's on your screen. It's 482-9559. On now to our question of the day. What percentage of Americans aged 55 to 64 do not have a basic will? Is it 27, 51, or all the way up to 89%? We have the answer coming back.
You don't walk into a doctor's office for some blanket prescription for whatever ails you. You expect individualized attention, a doctor who listens, and a treatment prescribed to meet your specific need. When it comes to your financial future, why expect anything less? If you would like an independent checkup from an independent advisor with access to hundreds of possible solutions to help you meet your goals, contact us today.
You need a plan for retirement to create the lifestyle you've always dreamed of. The first step is to tune into the Purpose-Based Retirement Radio Hour with your hosts, Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson, every Saturday morning at 11 and Sunday afternoon at 1 on 1190 WOWO and 107.5 FM.
We left you with the question of the day going into the break. It had to do with how many people aged 55 to 64 do not have a basic will as part of their estate plan today. Is it as low as 27%, 51, 67, or all the way up to 89% of Americans? Casey, what's the correct answer?
Well, Lee, the answer is B, 51%. 51% of individuals aged 55 to 64 at retirement age do not have a basic will. About 64% of the public and 62% between the ages of 45 and 54. And when we get to that 55 to 64 age, that's when we really need to have that basic will prepared. And why is that? And you might be saying, well, why do I need a will in the first place? Well, that's because we don't want to pass away in what's called intestate. And that would mean without a will, because we want to make sure that those assets you have today, I'm sure you would like to make sure, even if you don't want to leave anything behind, you may still leave things behind. And if you do, you want those things to pass on to those that you wanted them to pass on to, that you take care of that spouse, take care of your children in the best way possible, and reduce stress at what might be some of your loved ones' most stressful time during their entire lives. And if we do pass away intestate and without a will, that means that we may end up having a problem, because the court is going to decide where those assets end up going, and they usually do that judged by a basic formula, and that formula may leave 50% of your assets to your spouse and the other 50% to your surviving children, and may even end up forcing them to sell their home and their primary residence. And this is why it's so important to have these basic documents. They're incredibly cheap to get, and it's just one piece of an entire estate plan. When it comes to estate planning, we have those basic estate planning documents, but there's really three different pillars. One, we have our basic estate planning documents. Then we have our health care protection, because if we don't have our major health care protection, we may end up spending all of the assets that we plan to leave behind in the way of a legacy, and we ultimately have to optimize that legacy. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to walk you through all four of the main areas of estate planning, legacy optimization, and healthcare protection, beginning with some of those basic estate planning documents. First, there's basic trusts. So those basic trusts ensure that those assets that you may not have designated with a beneficiary pass outside of probate. And we definitely want to make sure that we have beneficiaries on those documents that say these things are going to fund this trust, because often I see that those trusts, those living trusts, are not funded until the date of death, and that means that they're still going to pass through probate. If it passes through probate, that can extend this period of time where creditors can come attack the estate, maybe up to 2 to 3 years, and also cost up to 10% of the value of the estate. Then we can have our basic will prepared to make sure those assets pass where we want them to pass, and maybe even take care of our children and make sure the right people are taking care of those children. The court isn't appointing somebody to take care of them. And powers of attorney, probably what I would describe as the most important estate planning document you could possibly have. That power of attorney is going to be available in case you became incapacitated and somebody could make financial decisions, such as even making distributions from one of your IRAs, and a spouse doesn't have that right without that financial power of attorney. And then we have the medical directive. The medical directive is sometimes taken care of in part of that living will or in a healthcare power of attorney, and this ensures that if you become terminally ill or incapacitated on some form of life support, that you can direct them how you would like to be treated, and your estate isn't drowned in those expenses that get built up during the hospital stays. Then we have healthcare protection. When it comes to healthcare protection, again, there's about 4 different ways we can do that. We can do so with an irrevocable trust, which helps us to qualify for Medicaid. And sometimes that is the best way to do it, but it can be very uncomfortable because you have to give up control of some of those assets. And anytime we give up control, anytime we do something that's irrevocable, we want to exercise extreme caution, because it may not even be necessary, because we might have been able to take care of that need in one of these other ways. For instance, long-term care insurance. That's going to be the most comprehensive way that you can take care of long-term care expenses during your retirement years if they should ever arise. And in the state of Indiana, you typically want that partnership plan, the Indiana Partnership Plan, but that can be very expensive. If that's too expensive, or you don't like the idea of paying for something that you may never actually use, and it could be lost dollars, you may want to utilize some type of life insurance. A hybrid life insurance strategy can allow you to set aside dollars every single year that you can use that death benefit for long-term care, and if you never use it for long-term care, then it still passes on to your heirs. Sometimes we'll use this as a supplemental strategy. I had a couple the other day that had a couple of old life insurance policies. They each had about a $200,000 death benefit. They were 60 years old. They had around $30,000 in cash value. We were able to take those from their existing policies, put them in new policies that gave them a larger death benefit in excess of $200,000. But now, instead of just having to die to get those monies, they could also use them to supplement some of their smaller long-term care policies. And then if we're uninsurable, we might want to look into some type of guaranteed lifetime withdrawal benefit annuities. Maybe you have a complication that won't allow you to get long-term care insurance or life insurance. Marshall and I had a couple that we worked with that had MS, and they were concerned that at any point they could need some form of long-term care, but they weren't using their retirement assets. We set aside around $500,000 to guarantee that they could create almost $100,000 a year to take care of that care for 5 years, and then it would revert back to $50,000 a year for the rest of their life after they passed away during that 5-year period. So we were able to take care of that cost for them, generating about $500,000 in coverage without them having to pay a premium out of pocket. Then it comes to legacy optimization. Maybe you want to maximize the legacy that you have today, ensure there is as little in taxes paid once you do pass away. One of the best ways that we can do that with little to no cost is establishing a stretch IRA. When we establish a stretch IRA, sometimes that's just simply communicating this with your loved ones, sitting down with your financial advisor and your beneficiaries and showing them how to stretch that IRA and the tax deferral benefits of that IRA over not just their life expectancy, but that of their children at the same time. We typically want to make the youngest beneficiary the beneficiary of that IRA so we can stretch it out over a longer and longer time horizon. Then a Roth conversion may come in handy as well. We may want to take advantage of our tax brackets every single year, making sure that if we're in the 15, maybe even the 25% tax bracket, we're shifting money over to a place where it'll never be taxed again. And we can leave it behind to our heirs where, yes, they'll still be forced to take a required distribution, but they'll never be taxed on that distribution either. Then we have charitable trusts. If you're charitably inclined, it often makes sense to make some of those changes today rather than waiting until you pass away. We had a couple that we worked with that had around $1 million in a concentrated stock position. We were able to create $50,000 a year in a tax-advantaged income, re-diversify that $1 million without a $150,000 tax burden, which would have occurred otherwise. And we are also able to get a $300,000 tax deduction today we could use to convert some IRAs and make sure they lower their tax brackets today. Then life insurance. Obviously, the one product that was created to leave a legacy behind tax-free and can sometimes be a valuable tool in legacy optimization or maximization. So that's estate planning. And there's a lot involved in estate planning, and it is the last thing that we're going to take care of during that financial plan, that purpose-based retirement that starts with liquidity planning, income planning, growth planning, and then we wrap everything up with that estate plan. If we leave one of those 4 things out, then we may not have a plan that can hold together throughout your entire retirement years.
Casey, got a question for you. If I am at, well, let's just use me as an example. I'm 59. When should I start thinking about that hybrid life insurance to fund my health care?
Yeah. Well, it can really be thought of at any time. I mean, for me, for instance, I have a policy that works much like that right now, where I'm maxing out my Roth IRAs, that I'm setting this aside in order to generate a tax-free income later in life, but by a byproduct, it generates $1 million death benefit that I can use for long-term disability at the same time. So right now, I could have a major issue, right? And it may be worse than long-term disability, maybe incapacitation, and now I have something that's going to cover me for that without spending thousands of dollars on a disability policy.
So there you go. Lots of good things to think about, and we hope you'll be one of the next 10 people to take advantage of our special offer today and call 482-9559 and get on the calendar for a complimentary review of your financial and retirement plan. Again, that number, 482-9559. That puts you in touch with Howard Bailey Financial. We'll see you next week.